This is Wayman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News.
Welcome back to another edition of Inside the News. Glad to have you with us. Ben Brunson, Frank Vernuccio online. My name's Guy Wayman. How you doing today, Ben?
I'm doing just fine, gentlemen. It is a great pleasure to be back.
All right, Frank, how are you?
Doing well. Looking forward to talking to our audience again today.
All right. We're going to just briefly touch upon what all the mainstream media is touching upon, and that's this Russia story. And they've been able to get us to work off of their contract document. And you being an attorney, you know that very well, Frank, that the winner comes when you work off whose contract it is. And it seems like the left, they've won in that argument, Frank.
Well, they certainly have. They have maintained the dominance of what the discussion actually is. You know, what's rather fascinating is that one of the things that no one really seems to be discussing very much at all is not the fact that, or the lack of facts that someone in the Trump campaign may have spoken to the Russians. It's the content of what was discussed, and it's the long history of Hillary Clinton's abuses and violations of the law. Why aren't we talking about the fact that it was Hillary Clinton that sold 20% of all U.S. uranium to the Russians? Why aren't we talking about the fact that it was Hillary Clinton, along with Barack Obama, who signed the horrible New START nuclear deal with the Russians that gave Moscow, for the first time in history, the lead in nuclear weapons? Why aren't we talking about the fact that it was Hillary Clinton who abandoned the American ambassador in Benghazi? Rather than talking about the substance, we're talking about the fluff of these meetings.
Absolutely. And Ben, your take on just this Russian meddling and the wearisomeness of the American people. They're just getting tired of dealing with this.
Well, you can only scream fire in a theater so many times.
Ooh.
And that proves to be nothing before people start to disengage from the entire attempt. This is the latest orchestrated attempt by the left stream media to attack Trump, to try to bring him down. It comes with all sorts of fevered words and opinions about how this is treason and we're going to impeach the president. And this is another example of something that will all come to naught. But it does achieve one important aim, as Frank pointed out. It shifts the focus to, once again, an attack on Donald Trump that must be defended by the White House, and keeps our eye off the ball of real issues that matter to the country, whether it's ongoing issues or past issues of indiscretions that we know about and are very well documented when it comes to people like Hillary and Bill Clinton.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Ben, I'm going to stick with you because of your digging into that past book that we talked about, Clinton Cash and all. But I believe that this is all, and Frank alluded to it as well as he did in that very first segment, or his first opening comments there, about getting us away from the main target. And we've talked about this before, the unmasking, which is really a national security issue, and these leaks, Ben.
Well, look, we've always theorized, and I've long for 30 years thought about the power of the NSA, the abilities that it has to spy on people abroad, which is its mandate, but of course also domestically, which is not its mandate. And the fact is that when you have that much power concentrated in an entity, it is only a matter of time, it seems to me, until a government succumbs to that power or an administration succumbs to that power and takes advantage of their capabilities. And it appears by a growing amount of evidence that indeed the Obama administration succumbed to the temptation to use the capabilities of the NSA to spy on its political enemies. We know for a fact that they did it when it came to Associated Press reporters and Fox reporter James Rosen and their investigation into leaks that they were suffering from during the first term of their administration, when they were the targets of leaking coming out of the government. And at that point, the left-stream media took a very dim view of leaks and the implications. But we know that the administration went very far in spying on reporters in efforts to find out the source of the leaks.
Okay.
But there is growing evidence that, in fact, when it came to the campaign of Donald Trump, that they succumbed to the temptation to use NSA capabilities to look into the communications of top Trump officials. They used a cover story, which was this whole Russian attempts to interfere with the election. But those who have seen the types of information that were sought and unmasked involving U.S. citizens involved in the Trump campaign say repeatedly that what they see is information that has nothing whatsoever to do with the Russians. These are routine communications involving strategy and other matters of the Trump campaign that were apparently unmasked at the request of the White House. That is a crime. That is subversion of the U.S. Constitution. That is something that is as serious as you can be, a true constitutional crisis, and yet that issue is being ignored and swept under the rug by the left-stream media with all of these false narratives when it comes to the Trump and Russia collusion.
Okay, Frank, this is what we do best, going inside the news with this unmasking. Your thoughts?
One of the things that seems to have been forgotten in all the discussion about this is the fact that the FISA court, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act court, initially rejected the Obama administration's attempt to place surveillance on the Trump Towers. The fact of the matter is the motives, the excuse that the Obama administration came up with were so flimsy that the FISA court just said no. They were repeatedly pressured to allow the Obama administration to have its way, and eventually the FISA court just gave in. I must say that I suspect that a good percentage of the FISA courts eventually allowing the surveillance to go forward was simply the realization that they had, the erroneous realization that, well, Clinton was going to be president, we'd better basically do what we have to do just to keep peace in the family, so to speak. But clearly, this was an abuse of power by the Obama administration and the Clinton campaign, and one which, exactly as Ben has pointed out, is a real affront to the Constitution. It is distressing that if you look across the entire panoply of media outlets, this is rarely being discussed at all. The power of the federal government, as it had been so often throughout the Obama administration, whether it's the IRS or other federal agencies, for being absconded with by the Obama administration for partisan political purposes, is one of the greatest threats we've ever had to our Constitution. No one is talking about it.
Okay, Frank, work product, and when you're preparing a document or your preparation, you have what is known as work product. Comey had work product when he was talking to Trump. That belongs to the United States government, not himself, and yet he treated it as if it were his own, didn't he, Frank?
Well, he did, and of course this again is part and parcel of what we've seen over the past 8 years of the Obama administration, where there is absolutely no line between the partisan concerns of the Obama administration and the Democrat Party and what belongs to the United States of America. We've seen this in history before. We saw in the old Soviet Union how it was the Communist Party, not the actual machinery of the Soviet government, that ran the country. We saw in Nazi Germany how it was the interest of the Nazi Party and not the civilian machinery of the German government that held sway. We've seen this historically before. It's happening here. It's happening now.
Okay, Ben, your thoughts.
Well, look, I think Frank makes a lot of great points. The fact of the matter is the statement that everyone knows to be true is that absolute power corrupts absolutely. And the reality is that a government left unchecked will devolve into using the power it has available to it to advance its own agenda. And this is a fact, and it is the fact that has drove our founding fathers to write the Constitution in the manner in which it did, which did everything possible to limit the power of government and to advance the rights of the individual above the rights of government. That is the entire point of our Bill of Rights. We talked about this last week on the show, and it is a fact. And if you have a press, a fourth column, a fourth estate, the press that is free and fair and has the right to pursue stories. You have a press that helps keep those rights in check. The press, during the early 70s, the press attempts to uncover the issues with the Nixon administration and uncover Watergate and the cover-up. To me, that was the press at its best. That's the press doing its job. But the problem is, in the 40 years since, the press has become a left-wing organization, ignoring the issues of Democratic administrations and just targeting Republican administrations. And that is a big problem for this country because it allows the Obama administration to ask intelligence agencies to unmask domestic intelligence for political purposes in the view that it can get away with that without press scrutiny. The Clinton Foundation and what the Clintons did, the hundreds of millions of dollars of foreign donations during the time at which Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, the deals that were done, that were facilitated by the State Department and the actions of Hillary Clinton while she was Secretary of State, and that resulted in quid pro quo donations going to the Clinton Foundation, well documented, never disproven, in fact, never even argued against. Even the New York Times ran a front page article on the Uranium One transactions, the uranium deal that resulted in 20% of U.S. uranium deposits winding up under the direct control of the Kremlin, and the 145 million of donations that flowed into the Clinton Foundation as part of those series of transactions which brought that all about. All of those deals were reliant upon approvals from the U.S. government, which Hillary Clinton facilitated while she was Secretary of State. That is true corruption. That is Russian collusion by definition, and corruption of the first order. And yet the only reason the Clintons would go through with that is with the surety that the press won't follow up and make it a news story the way they did when they followed up on Watergate. How is that? How can the press ignore that? This is very dangerous for this country. And the fact is that the press has so much power that it shapes even congressional investigations when the Republicans control Congress. And that is what's so disturbing and dangerous to our country right now.
Okay, Frank, we, the three of us, we're all part of the press and the media, and yet it is the media and the press that is, it really is in the tank for the left. And just as Ben so aptly put it, in the tank, they were in it for Hillary Clinton. That they had all their eggs in that one basket, Frank.
They weren't, of course, part of the harsh reaction to President Trump's administration is the embarrassment felt by the major media that they went all out for Hillary Clinton, and the people of the United States basically said, the heck with you, we don't trust you, we're not going to vote for the candidate that you're trying to ram down our throat. I want to expand also on an excellent point that Ben brought up about the lack of respect for law and order, the lack of respect for the integrity of the United States that the Clinton campaign had. This precedes Hillary Clinton. It goes all the way back to Bill Clinton's presidency. Let's not forget the stories, the proven facts that the Bill Clinton campaign was the recipient of aid and assistance from the Chinese government, indeed from the People's Liberation Army of China. We remember the stories about the California, I believe it was a Buddhist temple scandal or a Buddhist monk. Nothing, not definite there. It was absolutely true that all this occurred. In the year 2000, after years of assistance by the Chinese government, Bill Clinton signed legislation, I believe it was in November of 2000, just months before he left office, that gave permanent, basically most favored nation status to China. That resulted in the downfall of American industrial output. Since Bill Clinton signed that document to the Chinese who donated and assisted his campaign so heavily, we've seen 6,000 factories in the United States close. We've seen millions of middle-class jobs vanish. And yet, where's the outrage? Where's the discussion? Where's the resistance to that outright selling of the American worker and the American economy. It simply doesn't exist in our partisan media.
All right, we have about a minute and a half left in this segment here. Ben, just briefly, it's been a year since Seth Rich was murdered, and the press maybe wants to touch on it, but they don't dare touch on it because they don't want to end up dead too.
Well, look, that is a murder that is still unsolved, still inexplicable. A person who Julian Assange has all but confirmed was the source of information about leaks published by WikiLeaks. The information, particularly regarding the DNC efforts to derail Bernie Sanders' nomination or primary attempts in favor of Hillary Clinton. So there was a lot of reason, you might guess, for him to be murdered, but it goes unsolved, and it's just speculation. It looks like a murder that's never going to be solved. It is interesting that that Seth Rich had money on him, had a wallet on him, none of which was taken, which ostensibly would be the reason you murdered in the streets of Washington, D.C. in the middle of the night. But not in that instance.
All right, that's going to bring our first segment to a close. We've got a lot to talk about in segments 2, 3, and 4. We're talking about nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles and the world security and the Poland trip. We'll be back.
You're listening to Wayman, Brunson, and Vernuscio, Inside the News.